As one Kikuyu elder put it in the 19th century, the Maasai have two overriding passions, cattle and warfare. Cattle are their pride and source of livelihood, while warfare is an important ingredient used as proof of manhood. With this perfect description of traditional Maasai warriors in mind, we are going to look at how the Maasai related with one of their neighbors, the KIKUYU, as well as the different conflicts throughout history that shaped the two tribes. Even more interesting, this topic was suggested by one of you guys. So, as I always say, if you have topics or legends from your community you'd like me to cover in one of my videos, then kindly name them in the comment section below. I'd also highly appreciate it if you smashed the like button, subscribe to my channel, and turned on the notification bell. All these actions will help my channel grow and allow me to create more videos in the future. Without further ado, let's skip to the most interesting part of the video and start with an overview of the conflict between the two communities. First and foremost, I'd like to dispel the widely held misconception that the Maasai and the KIKUYU were enemies, or the view that the two communities were constantly at war with each other. If anything, it was quite the opposite. The Maasai were extremely skilled warriors and were pastoralists, whereas the KIKUYU were expert agriculturists who occupied some of the most fertile lands in Kenya. So, as expected, the fact that the tribes were specializing at different things meant that they always needed each other in some way, shape or form. Let's take the Maasai for example. Like most pastoralists in East Africa, the Maasai were particularly vulnerable to famines because any sort of natural calamities such as cattle-related epidemics or unfavorable weather patterns were a threat to their natural source of livelihood, which was their livestock. On such occasions, the Maasai were heavily dependent on their agricultural neighbors, with whom they either had to trade or seek refuge to escape starvation. As 𝗬𝗨𝗣𝗣𝗢𝗥 noted in his book, sometimes, especially in times of food shortage and of great drought in Maasai country, Maasai women would hand over their children to the KIKUYU women who had gone trading in exchange for food. 𝗬𝗨𝗣𝗢𝗥 goes on to clarify that this was not in any sense a question of selling their children as slaves. No. Two things usually happened. The Maasai would either come back in better times and ransom their children, and in cases when the famines extended for long periods of time, then the children would simply get adopted by the KIKUYU families and even get identical rights to those of other KIKUYU-born children. Also note, no stigma was attached to this form of trade, and the system was not only practiced by the Maasai and the KIKUYU, but also by the Akamba and all other Mount Kenya tribes. Now, let's look at the many cases when the KIKUYU needed the help of the Maasai. According to history, the Maasai had everything the KIKUYU lacked or desired most, and this included skins, hides, leather cloaks, livestock, and even ornaments such as cowrie shells and beads. Even more important, the Maasai warriors would come in handy in times when the KIKUYU tribesmen were threatened by any external and sometimes internal forces. A great example is when the hunter-gathering 𝗣𝗟𝗡𝗔𝗦 tribe in Mount Kenya started raining terror upon the KIKUYU. This took place around the early 1800s, and it wasn't until KIKUYU warriors enlisted the help of Maasai warriors that they were able to defeat and annihilate the 𝗣𝗟𝗡𝗔𝗦 tribe. As Mr. Hobley will note in his book entitled Ethnology of the Akamba and Other East African Tribes, arguably the most significant cultural influence the Maasai had on the KIKUYU was in the field of initiation and military tactics. Even the insignia of the KIKUYU and Maasai warriors, which included shield decorations, hairstyles and so on, were identical. Even more interesting, by the beginning of the 20th century, a huge portion of the KIKUYU family units claimed to trace their origins to Maasai ancestors, while an even bigger number had Maasai blood as a result of the extensive intermarriage ceremonies that had taken place between the two tribes. Even linguistically, the KIKUYU language is heavily indebted to the Maasai language, from which it has borrowed almost all words relating to cattle, as well as some religious concepts, such as Ngai, the KIKUYU term for God, which was borrowed from the Maasai term for God, Enkai. As Jomo Kenyatta noted in his book titled Facing Mount Kenya, To take a concrete case, my grandmother on my father's side was a Maasai woman called Mosana. And in reciprocity for this friendly feeling, my aunt, elder sister of my father, was married to a Maasai chief called Sendeu and was treated as the head wife. Exchange visits were made on both sides, and I had the opportunity of visiting her and staying there for a couple of months as a member of the family. Even in times of instability in the Kikuyu nation, all Kikuyu tribesmen are welcome to take refuge among the Maasai, and the Kikuyu will also be expected to return the favor in times of instability in the Maasai nation. A great example is the 𝗧𝗪𝗪𝗧. Taking place around 1870, the 𝗧𝗪𝗪𝗧 were a series of civil wars fought between the different factions of the Maasai tribe. During this period, the Kikuyu provided refuge to a lot of Maasai tribesmen who had been displaced by the internal conflict. Now, let's forward to when the Maasai had to return the favor. Approximately 5 decades later in 1918, when Kenya was under the colonial authority, the British Army decided to recruit Kikuyu tribesmen to help them fight in the First World War. As expected, many Kikuyus were opposed to the idea of fighting for the enemy, and so those who disagreed with the recruitment moved to live among the Maasai, who had also refused to fight for the British. Among those who moved to the Maasai land include again Jomo Kenyatta. Actually, here is a fun fact. While Jomo Kenyatta was living among the Maasai during this recruitment period, he adopted Maasai customs and started wearing Maasai jewelry, including a bearded belt known as Kenyatta. Shortly thereafter, Jomo Kenyatta, who was called Kamau Ngengi at the time, took to calling himself Kenyatta after the government. Anyway, needless to say, everything we've looked at showcases why a gentleman's agreement was in the best interest of both the Maasai and the Kikuyu. That said, considerable raiding and warfare periods did take place between the two, so let's skip to the next section of the video and look at how they played out. To understand how the two communities fought, we'll need to take a brief look at how peace treaties were signed. On the day of the peace negotiations, elders from both communities would meet at a designated spot, and both of them would bring a goat or ram. After carrying out a short ritual, the tribal elders from the Maasai community would then stand up, take the goat they had brought with them, and slaughter it while taking the following binding and solemn oath. If we ever deliberately kill an Kikuyu tribesman, may we be slaughtered like the goat. If we ever harm them in any way, may we be killed in the same way. After the Maasai elders were done, the Kikuyu elders would then go on and do the same thing, promising never to harm a Maasai tribesman. Even more importantly, extremely serious consequences were believed to befall any community that broke its promise, and these consequences could range from extended droughts to disease pandemics. And in cases when a small group of people happened to breach the peace treaty, then those people would simply get handed over to the community that they had offended. A great example is a warrior from present-day Kiambu called Wangai, who was handed over to the Maasai after breaking the treaty in the 1890s. So, what about in cases when the two tribes couldn't reach a resolution, or cases when one of the tribe's warriors wanted vengeance? Well, in these cases, a battle would break out. However, these battles and raids were also conducted according to specific rules. It was a recognizable and common custom that armies of the Maasai or Kikuyu would send a message, for instance, pointing out that they were planning on carrying out a raid in a specific area, or that they were planning on breaking out a prisoner held in Kikuyu land. Then, on the days of the battles or raids, there were additional specific rules that every single warrior from both communities had to adhere to as well, regardless of how fierce the battle got. Some of these decrees associated with the battles and raids included not killing children, not killing women, not killing the old, not killing the physically disabled, not killing the sick, and it was also a taboo to take the life of an enemy who had already knelt before you and called a truce. A custom in the Kikuyu and Maasai culture even stated that any warrior who broke any of the rules above was to get struck down by warriors from his own tribe. In addition to that, regardless of all the hostilities in progress between the two tribes, trading between women from the two communities was supposed to go on and continue as usual. As Joseph Thompson would note in 1885 in his book titled Through Maasai Land, curiously enough, however, though they were eternally at war to the knife with each other, there is a pact between them not to molest the women folk of either party. Hence the curious spectacle is exhibited of Maasai women wending their way with impunity to a Kikuyu village, while their relatives are probably engaged in a deadly fight close at hand. This claim by Thompson would later get confirmed by Ludwig von Hornell and Samuel Teleki a few years later. Not only did the two find that women were extremely safe in spite of Maasai Kikuyu feuds, but they even appointed a Maasai woman to act as their intermediary when going across Gikuyu land. In cases when the Gikuyu and the Maasai were not interested in a full-blown war that would only end in a lot of blood getting shed, they had another system. Both tribes will pick their best warriors, form a circle, and then instruct the two warriors in the middle to fight to the death. If the Gikuyu warrior managed to come out victorious, then the Gikuyu had won the battle. And if the Maasai warrior came out victorious, then the Maasai had won the battle. Here is another interesting fact. Gikuyu warriors were as likely to raid fellow Gikuyu clans as they were to raid the Maasai, and vice versa, Maasai warriors to raid fellow Maasai communities as they were to raid the Gikuyu. Again, quoting Jomo Kenyatta, in territories where this friendly relationship was established, especially between the Kaptei Maasai and the Southern Gikuyu, the warriors of the two tribes joined together to invade another section of the Maasai like Loita, or a section of Gikuyu like Tharaka or Mpesa. A great example is what happened in Nyeri shortly after the Rinda pest epidemic that decimated livestock all across Kenya around the end of the 19th century. According to several historical records, it appeared that Embu, Gishugu, Ndia, and Meru weren't as affected by the epidemic as the rest of the country was. So, in September 1891, a man named Ongombe Ihura from Nyeri recruited the help of Maasai warriors, combined them with warriors from his community, and carried out the largest and most famous raid of the period on his fellow Gikuyu tribesmen located in present-day Ndia constituency in Kirinyaga. It's estimated that more than 500 Gikuyu and Maasai warriors took part in the raid. All said and done, it appears when you look at historical records that good relations between the two tribes appeared to have been the norm rather than the exception. And in light of the fact that peace between the two communities was made under oath and was unbreakable without mutual consent and due warning, we can confidently conclude that the sporadic fighting instances were more of brutal forms of sport than real wars. And to conclude, note that at no point in history were all Kikuyu clans or factions at war with all the Maasai. Luiliki even records in his book that the friendships that resulted from the peace treaties were so deep that it was not uncommon for Maasai warriors to be invited to spend a whole dancing season in the Gikuyu country as guests of the Kikuyu warriors who would teach them their dance styles and even allow them the privilege of having a Gikuyu girls as sleeping partners at night. That's it for today. If you like the content, kindly do not forget to smash the like button below. This will help the channel grow and allow me to make more videos in the future. Also, if you have a topic you think I should cover, do not hesitate to leave a comment below. Thank you and see you again next week.